Hello and bonjour. I'm Nancie Lataille. I'm a partner at Heidrick Struggles. I'm the managing partner of our board and CEO practice in Canada. I'm also the regional managing partner for our corporate officers practice. I'm delighted to be joined today by Katya Laviolette, who has a phenomenal HR career. She's currently the Chief People Officer at 1Password, and 1Password is beloved by many of us. It is a password manager, a digital vault, a form filler, and secure digital wallet. She's also the board director at Labs, which specializes in a circular economy in the golf and cycling sector. Prior to being at 1Password, Katya was Chief People Officer at SSENSE, and prior to that, she was CHRO at Transcontinental for several years, was also the VP People and Culture at Radio-Canada and CBC, and the list goes on. Katya, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Nancy. Happy to be here with you.
So obviously, as I described your background, one can quickly see that you spent many years at very large and established organizations. And a few years ago, you decided to make a switch and go into the technology and high growth environment. So that was quite the jump. So I'm curious to get your views on the skills and experiences that you currently leverage and your current environment, as you know, especially in the scaling up environment.
Sure, I'm happy to talk about that. I think it's I've had the privilege to work in a lot of different industries, very large global companies, manufacturing, media, crown corporations with CBC Radio-Canada. And most of the bulk of my career has been spent in these large organizations in various roles, and really a good 13 years in packaging and printing and media in a large publicly traded organization. We say in French, the fil conducteur around this is around entrepreneurship and so forth. And so back in 2018, I decided it was time to move into an industry that it would be very different for me and really go and work with founders and entrepreneurs. And I think that what I have accumulated throughout my career is very, very helpful to what I see today. At first, frankly, I was actually kind of questioning, how am I going to make this leap and pivot? So it took a bit of time to realize that I was going to get into my comfort zone, because at the end of the day, on the HR side of it, if you can pick up the industry, if you can pick up the dynamics of the business, how the business is structured, be it public, private, and so forth, you have the whole piece around people that doesn't necessarily change from business to business. It's how you actually listen to the industry that you're in or the company that you're in, and how things get done and what you need to accomplish. So I actually think that it is a real advantage to have, especially in what I would call a G&A function, to have had multiple experiences, unionizations, lots of situations that are crisis management, building businesses, acquiring businesses, selling off businesses. All those pieces are like a puzzle in someone's career, and you have this great foundation. You then have to figure out how to pick those pieces out that make sense, but apply them into an industry that you will actually help them benefit from your skill, all the while listening and actually watching the different dynamics and so forth. So there were surprises. Businesses in tech, SaaS-based businesses, e-commerce, they move a lot faster. And so sometimes you have to figure out when to go fast, and sometimes you have to figure out when to go slow and say, no, we need to think about this a bit more and draw on those different pressure points.
It's been fascinating to watch your career. And so as you transition, what are the skills and experiences that you have since acquired that you would have never acquired in an established environment?
I have acquired a lot over the years, and now it's actually coming back to me. I'm doing some things that I've done, 15, 20 years ago. And when you go into a scale up, you better be willing to roll up your sleeves and work at, I call it work successfully. And I've seen it in both kind of tech-based businesses I've been in. You have to roll up your sleeves, and then you also have to think strategically. And that is, for me, kind of a recipe of success. I think it's kind of the gradation and how things hit you constantly. I was just talking to someone this morning about scale ups and how fun they can be and an adrenaline rush, but sometimes you have to take a step back, recharge yourself, and then continue to go. But when you you start on a Monday and you finish on a Friday, you can get a lot accomplished in that regard. And that's kind of when I come back to the entrepreneurship around working in very large family-founded businesses, publicly traded businesses, but really with that fiber of entrepreneurship. I think that's what really drives me.
Go into 1Password and also perhaps touch upon your experience at SSENSE. Both environments, based on my understanding, are remote first, especially 1Password. And as we read the news every day, we're bombarded with the importance of being in the office to continue to build on a culture, to continue to build on a culture. So how are you thinking about the culture in a remote first environment? And what have you been doing to build the connective tissue?
I had an interesting quote that I saw the other day that, go to the office, don't go to the office, go on Zoom, go off Zoom, work async, don't work async. Like, there's a lot of experts out there. People have a lot of opinions. And I think you have to do what is most important for your company and how your company works. So if I use 1Password, we're remote first. We're a 17-year-old company, bootstrap company, really took off in 2019 with a number of funds of rounds of funding and so forth. And we've been able to build, we'll finish the year around 900 employees in 4 different countries. And the fundamental premise of 1Password is it is remote first. We believe we can produce stellar products within this environment, and we choose very carefully. Now there's COVID that overlays that, but when to bring people together and how to bring people together. And we don't feel that they need to be sitting in the office to be able to do that, but we have to create moments which actually benefit and actually promote our culture. So you can create culture remotely. I mean, 1Password is a great example. And so now, as we've grown and you get larger and you get more global, you have to, there's sensitivities of people. So everyone is different. Some people need more face time. Some people may need time, not on the screen and so forth. And so we're very open and very flexible to how things get done. And we can collaborate in all sorts of different ways. I do see an uptick now that we're, a bit further advanced and we hope safer. We'll see what the next wave of COVID holds, but we are doing more meetups and so forth, but it's not to ask someone to come and sit in the office and so forth. In my other life on the tech side in e-commerce, it's hybrid. So prior to COVID, it was in the office, in the warehouse. Everything was in almost like a campus. And obviously COVID changed that. I spent a lot of time in a remote environment and going one day from in the office to the next day completely out for a long period of time. And now I believe they've come back to what they call a hybrid flexible option. So it can be done. And the other thing that overlays the challenge of this these days is supply and demand for talent. We have challenges in every industry recruiting talent. So it is an employee market. We need to listen, we need to pivot, we need to experiment, we need to be continually evolving. So I don't think anything, especially from an HR practitioner standpoint, is ever going to be the same as it was back in March 2020. Things have fundamentally shifted, and you have to be open to continue to work through that shift and build upon that.
So fast forward 2 to 3 years from now, what do you think you'll see in the workplace? What is it going to look like? Some hybrid, remote, in person?
My feeling is it will never, and I'm quite adamant about this. It won't go back to how it was, and so everyone has to have a different way of working. But I think that there will be more opportunities to collaborate, to iterate together. I think that there are fundamentally areas where you need to be in. So manufacturing, you need to be in the plant to produce the product. And that's a given. It's how do you ensure that whoever's supporting, say, a manufacturing line is able to work collaborative as a team. So I still think 3 to 5 years, there'll probably be a bit more of a shift back into hybrid and flexible. And what will be the delineating factor, I believe, will be the supply and demand for talent. So the more supply, the more choice an employer has, and so forth. But I do believe we've been able to do things much in a very agile way, in a very flexible way. And people have there are, for me, on the remote side, a lot of opportunity from a flexibility standpoint. What it brings is, for an individual themselves, they have to be very grounded in how they manage that flexibility. Otherwise, you could be working all the time unless you put your own boundaries. So prior to kind of the whole remote work across the globe fad, I think employers were able to actually help set those boundaries. It's harder now, so we're counting on employees to be able to say to us, hey, what do we need to set the boundaries? And we have to listen as employers and adapt.
Taking a different avenue, talking about board of directors. And unsurprisingly, there is still a push for more diversity on boards. And we also see now a push for HR expertise at the board level. It's not something that we saw before COVID. And so if you take a look at a recent survey that we conducted of the TSX 60, it now shows that 7% of the new board appointments bring HR expertise as CHRO. How important do you think it is for boards now to have HR expertise?
Well, I would see me probably asking a rhetorical question, but I mean, we're late to the game. Like I talk to investors and pension funds and so forth. And in those areas, even when investment funds are acquiring companies, even in their operating practices, I believe they're late to the game because they should have operating partners who understand talent as well. So it's actually the board and as well what I would kind of call the investment space. And I think that 7% is unfortunate. It needs to be a lot higher than that. What I would say is that when you bring the talent piece to the table, you have to marry it with fit around the business, understanding how the business runs to be able to translate that into a talent strategy as well. I just think it's an imperative. And like, you take a look at the skills matrix on proxies and so forth of what people require. And sometimes what I find disappointing is you take a look at it and you take a look at the incumbents who are extremely well qualified, but none of them have actually been in HR operating roles. And so it begs the question, why can't HR be at the table, and why would COVID have to be a catalyst for that? It's happened. And so let's use that as an opportunity to build on that, that importance. And I think, we're not, a lot of these companies are not fully automated companies. They rely on labor, people, and so forth. You see it today, the challenges, and it all kind of comes down to one denominator. So talent is critical, and that number has to keep climbing, Nancie.
I agree. And it's definitely something that we hear in the market more and more, as you well know. So aside from HR, like, what are the other skills or experiences that you think boards could benefit from? I
think there is the whole piece on sustainability. We are obviously at a pivotal moment in the world in terms of many aspects of sustainability. And I think that that is also a very, very critical aspect. I think there is a whole piece around risk and control that I think the boards are obviously managing that, but then there's the risk and control overlaid with the piece around talent. So I think people think about risk and control sometimes in a very traditional way. And so if you take talent as the foundation and you intersect that with the different areas of what you would require from a board, I think you will see the complete benefit of doing that. And individuals need to be able to come to the table in the board seat. It's much like the CHRO or the chief people officer role. Yes, you have a lane that you work in a good part of the time, but you need to get out of your lane too and help the business as well. So I believe it's also very similar at the board level.
Katya, thank you so much for the great insights that you provided us today. I think that we all learned quite a bit, and fascinating conversation. So thank you again for joining us today. It was absolutely delightful, and wishing you a great weekend. Thank you.
No, it's a real pleasure, Nancy. Thank you very much for inviting me and taking the time really to focus on the importance of talent. It's much appreciated. Thanks very much.
Thank you.